Hi, it is 5 o'clock and you have chosen to spend your time with us in the middle of a pandemic, an election year, immense amount of injustice and hardship and distress. And we are so grateful. So thank you so much for being here. And this is the third part of Let There Be No Regrets. And we have two amazing, wonderful speakers who will have a discussion today regarding an anthology. So I want to not take up too much time. Thank you so much. I do want to say this art behind me with the three, I can't use the word right now. You know what they are. But this, well, they have antlers. It's a piece of art from Fawn Douglas, who is a local artist here in Las Vegas. And you can follow her at Nulu Art. She's a native artist, an indigenous artist. So please look her up because her art makes my home happy. So let's get into things. The Joy Harjo program series. I'm Vogue Robinson, by the way. I'm Vogue. The Joy Harjo program series is presented by Poetry Promise, Las Vegas Jewish Film Festival, and the Clark County Poet Laureate. The program series is supported by Nevada Humanities, Nevada National Endowment for the Humanities, Nevada Arts Council, National Endowment for the Arts, Clark County, Nevada, City of Henderson, City of Las Vegas, League of Women Voters, Nevada National Organization for Women, and the Unitarian Universalist Church of Las Vegas. We also have a great deal of in-kind support from a lot of amazing community organizations. When I tell you we asked for support, and I think almost every organization that we asked to support us immediately said yes. That they would spread the word and let people know that this is something that they support and that we want to provide this to people. I mean, we want to do it any time of the year, but there's no time like the present. I see people. Lillian's here. Awesome. Oh, Benny Tate. Oh, Benny Tate, welcome. Hi, welcome. All right. I also get the pleasure of introducing Principal Man Ian Zabarte, and they will be doing a land acknowledgement. Principal Man Ian Zabarte of the Western Bands of the Shoshone Nation is an advocate for research and protection of the land and people of the Great Basin, Nuene Segovia, and People's Mother Earth. From 1951 until 1992, 100 above-ground nuclear tests and over 800 underground tests took place at the Nevada test site where Yucca Mountain is still under consideration to store all of America's high-level nuclear waste. The United States Air Force is currently appealing to expand their bombing range into the Desert National Wildlife Refuge. Wildlife Refuge and the Nevada test site sit on the traditional lands of the Western Shoshone and the Southern Paiutes. Ian will now share a land acknowledgement.
Thank you for the opportunity to be with you and acknowledge the land and Nunavut-speaking people, the Shoshone Paiute. We have the oldest life in the world here in the Great Basin. The 6,000-year-old bristlecone pine tree, the 11,700-year-old Yitumbi, known as creosote, and the 80,000-year-old plus pando, known as quaking aspen. Our custom is sharing. The Western Bands of the Shoshone Nation of Indians entered into formal relations with the United States by signing a peace treaty, the Treaty of Ruby Valley in 1863 on October 1, 157 years ago. The treaty is in full force and effect. Sharing is important because it is the measure of our humanity. Acknowledgement too is important. I want to acknowledge that a poet ended the Cold War. Olza Selemenov is a Kazakh poet, scholar, and politician who went on national television in the former Soviet Union and told his Kazakh people not to build nuclear weapons. The people listened, and the worker city of Semipalatinsk stopped building nuclear weapons. Instead, they created the Nevada Semipalatinsk movement. Selemenov then came to Shoshone country at the Nevada test site, and together we sought to end the nuclear weapons buildup and testing. We were successful. There is still much work to be done to protect the land and people. My people suffer and continue to endure the adverse health consequences known to be plausible from exposure to radiation, and we need help. But we have had successes preventing Yucca Mountain in licensing at the Nuclear Regulatory Commission because the Treaty of Ruby Valley is in full force and effect. We ask you now to help us and protect the land and people of the Great Basin, and thank you for this opportunity to share our story. Thank you.
Hello, everyone. Thank you, Ian, for giving us greater appreciation and understanding of our place and time. Everyone who is participating today can compose your questions in the Q&A, and toward the end of the program, I will present them to our guests. Joy Harjo and Terry Tempest Williams are cosmic sentient beings, intimately involved in pursuing the balance between nature and humanity that is the fulcrum of our survival. Their discourse today illuminates: when the light of the world was subdued, our songs came through. A Norton anthology of Native nations poetry. Joy and Terry are visionaries, teachers, healers, and guides to the transformative pathways of renewal within us all. Words are the sacrifice on the altar of silence that offer meaning to our purpose. In the spirit of Tikkun Olam, on the cusp of the harvest moon, please join me in welcoming the harmonic convergence of Joy and Terry as they share thoughts and words together in our company. Thank you, Terry, for launching us on our journey in conversation with Joy.
Thank you, Josh. And it is such an honor to be here with Joy. And I just want to thank you, Vogue, for welcoming us. And can you hear me?
Yeah. Yes.
Okay. I just want to say that this is such a privilege to be here. And Josh, I want to acknowledge you and thank you for the beauty of your friendship, the generosity of your spirit, and the vibrancy of your intellect. And thank you so much for bringing Joy and I together. She is a hero of mine. And I want to say to you, Ian, please count me as an ally. And I too share the concern that you hold, you and your people, the Shoshone Nation, regarding the Nevada test site. Many of my family, half my family is dead because of being downwinders, as I know many of your people as well. And one of the great privileges of my life was being able to be given permission in the Ruby Valley Treaty through Bill Rossi and Corbin Harney, heroes of mine. And I also was able to meet Olav Suleimanov and felt his power as a poet. So thank you to all of you and to all of you who are joining us. Joy, I need to see you so that I can talk to you.
I'm on here. Let's see.
Oh, there you are.
Yeah.
I just want you to know what a privilege it is to share this time with you. I think the last time I saw you was at the airport in Alaska. You were carrying your saxophone and I was so excited and we shared a few words. I also want you to know my gratitude and respect for you and how it is deeply personal that when my grandmother died in 1989, I found your book, and Secrets from the Center of the World became the closest thing I have to a prayer book at that time. And I memorized so many sentences. Invisible fish swim this ghost ocean, now described by waves of sand. And I remember looking up at the Milky Way, and one of your sentences stuck with me. I can hear the sizzle of newborn stars. And I thought, that's where my grandmother is. And the last thing I want to say is, when my brother, his death by suicide 2 years ago, what in his apartment, and he was, the one thing on his wall that remained was a broadside that I had given him of Eagle Poem by you. And I remember when we were preparing his body for cremation, that line, we pray that it will be done in beauty, became our mantra as we entered his body into those flames. And I felt that because he had so absorbed your poem about Eagle, and he was a raptor rehabilitator, that when they opened those doors and what we saw were the remains, his body was gone, but there was this aura of wings, and it really looked like Icarus. And again, you came into my mind in beauty. So I just want to thank you and welcome you from my home in Castle Valley, the Red Rock Desert. I brought you some sage, and I'll mail it to you. And just knowing that you're in your own home ground in Oklahoma with cellular blood memory of the woodlands from Southeast United States, I just want you to know what a privilege it is to have this time with you.
Well, thank you. Yeah, I want to say Mado, or thank you too. And I remember it has been way too long since we've seen each other, but I have your words and your stories. And I thought about you recently when my husband and I drove from across country, socially distanced, you know, in our van we were in, and I thought about you and your words as we drove across, you know, not far from Salt Lake City, and from that whole area of this beautiful earth that is larger. We really are the earth. We are the earth. You know, I remember it was a few years ago, I got asked to be part of this Woody Guthrie thing here in Oklahoma, you know, and he was a wonderful writer, thinker, you know, social activist and so on. And it was at the end of the event, and I was asked to read some of his poetry, and everyone was singing, "This land is my land, this land is your land." And I understand the spirit of it and how, but I'm standing up there, the only Native person up there, and I'm thinking, wait a minute, you know, this isn't, we are the land. We are the land. And I so appreciated that piece that you wrote recently for the New York Times. Oh, what was the name of it? You know, where you essentially came out, you know, looking at the burning and the birds and the shift. You know, we're seeing what was predicted. I sat in those circles when I was really young with the elders who were making these predictions, that if we did not change our ways, if we did not start to listen, if we didn't remember that we are the land, then these kinds of things would happen.
And it seemed like, you know, the assignment was to write an obituary for the land. And it was so clear to me, as you say, about the birch trees, you know, we will miss the birch trees, they will not miss us, you know, just that the land will continue to drop its seeds, the forest will recover, and the land will go on. And I realized I was writing our obituary.
Mm-hmm.
But, you know, Josh and I were talking about your beautiful reading on Tuesday, and I wish that that could have been broadcast to all Americans as a prologue of dignity and respect and love and all that you brought to us, as a reminder of what voice sounds like, looks like, feels like, and the power of words to take us into that deeper place before the debates. And I don't think it's any accident, Joy, that you are our poet laureate at this moment in time. And I think all of us who love and know your work are so grateful for the space that you are holding at this moment, which matters. And, you know, the question I have for you is, you know, about this moment. And you said so beautifully that the pandemic has been, it's calling ourselves back from all the places we lost ourselves in, calling the spirit back. And I'm wondering what you are seeing, sensing, and hearing at this moment.
Where do you start? Where does anyone start except that I know from what, you know, and I don't see everything, I don't hear, I just have my own space. But we know that we're at a crucial moment of shift. We know it in our bodies, we know it in the sky, we know it in the fire, we know it in the violence, we know it in you know, we know it when disrespect and is the main discourse. We know that we're in a, that there's something, we're in a, where the wound is opened. Mm-hmm. The wounding that started this, the wounding from which this destruction of human spirit, of remembering, of connection, you know, where we went awry, we went astray, that wound is open. And so what it's saying is that, well, here's an opportunity. It looks like it's gone too far. I mean, ultimately, what use are humans to the biosphere? I've wondered that. I still haven't figured it. I make little stories about, you know, how you know, we're story gatherers, we tell the story, you know, we make songs, and the earth likes to be acknowledged, but even then, that's not quite enough. It doesn't quite settle it for me.
So,
and, yeah.
How do you, you know, we're teaching this class with students. It's called The Climate of Unknowing. And we've been talking about the earth. We've been reading some of your work. And some of the students have been really uncomfortable, and largely with my views of the earth, asking the question, is the earth not enough? You know, and that line of yours, which is so beautiful, we are not losing the birch trees are losing us. And what you're saying about the respect and where we find ourselves now. And they were saying, how can you be talking about prairie dogs and pinyon and juniper trees and fires when, you know, people are being murdered on the streets? And it's a fair question. You know, when Breonna Taylor is shot 6 times and the 2 officers are exonerated. And, you know, what's the bridge? Because I think, you know, it's all interconnected. As you say, we are Earth. But what would you say to those students? What is the bridge between the human and our human suffering and grief and the earth and all its creatures and our grief?
First of all, that quote is by an Anishinaabe artist, Wayne I forget how to, he's got a nice Anishinaabe name, but it's, yeah, he's the one who said, you know, we're not losing the birch trees, because they were having trouble finding their materials, but the birch trees are losing us. The bridge, it goes back to, it goes way back. It goes way, you go back to one, if we're looking at America and the founding of this country, you know, on these great principles of democracy, some of the ideas borrowed from indigenous, from the Iroquois and Muskogee people. And it goes back to a disconnect. It goes back, you could even go back farther, you know, before Europeans came to the Americas. I mean, but in this particular, with Breonna, with all this violence that, you know, our generation, we thought we had made great strides in the story of this country for inclusion and connection, but it wasn't enough, because it did not hold. And maybe maybe we fooled ourselves. But the connection is that you cannot, if you look at if you participate, we all participate one way or the other, even by not participating, in a sense. But if you see yourself maybe in a not human centric world, and you see yourself as, say you shift your mind so that you're a part of, you understand, you see the diversity, you see an incredible diversity, and you understand that there is no hierarchy. I mean, that's one of the crucial things there. There's no hierarchy.
Mm-hmm.
Not one plant is given dominion over another.
Mm-hmm.
Every animal, even the little rat and others, everyone has their own path and something they are given to contribute. And it is not for, say, a gray rat to attack a pink rat or a pink or whatever and say that that's, you can take it to that part of the story.
Mm-hmm.
So that, where did this, you go back to dominion, the idea that someone, a creation, one of the creations has dominion over others. Humans have been given other tools, but it really goes back to respect and lack of respect. And I think you can make a clear line it goes back to, being part of the earth and then thinking that killing the earth off in your mind,
Mm-hmm.
and killing off responsibility in your mind, or fooling yourself into thinking that you own the world, you own all the resources, they're all yours. You can open up bears' ears, you can destroy the world to be richer, to put more money in you and your family's pockets, and you can kill anyone or hurt anyone who gets in your way.
And it seems that thank you so much for talking about that notion of hierarchy, because, I think when you look at what's happening to the earth, you see acts of arrogance and ignorance, as you say, with bear's ears, prejudice and privilege, that it's all the same story that's gone awry, as you say. And I worry because I think as more and more people are in urban landscapes, we forget what these lands mean and what wild nature means, or the migration of birds, or the movement of animals, and the gifts of plants. And I so appreciate this anthology because it feels that it is fleshed with that sense of respect and cycles and irreverence and reverence at once. I love the title, When the Light of the World Was Subdued, Our Songs Came Through. Where did that title come from?
That title was inspired. It's in the first piece in the Pacific. We organize this by geographical region rather than political boundary. And one of the oldest pieces in here is a very, very small excerpt from the Kumulipo, or the Hawaiian creation story. And in English, in Hawaiian language, it's beautiful. But in English, it says, at that time that turned the heat of the earth, at the time when the heavens turned and changed, at the time when the light of the sun was subdued to cause light to break forth, at the time of the night of Makali'i, then began the slime which established the earth, the source of deepest darkness, of the depth of darkness, of the depth of darkness. Okalipo lipo, okalipo lipo, okalipo, okala, okalipo, okapo, povali hoi, hanau, kapo. Of the darkness, of the depth of darkness, of the darkness of the sun, in the depth of night, it is night, so was night born.
Mm.
This is beautiful. And so I was inspired by that, thinking how even in this creation story, where maybe we have destroyed the earth, we've destroyed ourselves. Like you said, we've destroyed ourselves, because the earth, we're like little viruses or something, the earth will be restored. And then here we are, our little humans coming up through the darkness into a creation story. Once again, because we're beloved, you know, maybe some of the most beloved creatures. We're all beloved, but here we are coming up through in one of my poems, in our, you know, we emerge, here we are emerging again. And it is a time when the, you know, the light of the world is subdued. I mean, literally, the sun is not as bright as it was before. You know, the water is not as blue, and the air is not as clear, and the color, we don't have as many birds, we don't have as many frogs and different kinds of animals. It's, the world is subdued. So then we go, we have to think about a story, because there's no story without challenge.
And I love the paradoxes that you play with and embody, both in your own work, Joy, which I find such comfort in, that we can hold opposing points of view at once. And, you know, grief and joy, or as you say, creation and destruction, that it's all a piece of this. I'm interested in the blessing of words with our shared friend, Scott Momaday. And that last line, it's where he says, words, had I could tell of the splintered sun, I could articulate the night sky, had I words. You know, which to me says we could never have the words that could match creation. We have the stories or the orality that you talk about, and how the paradox of the written text, but the orality that is how do you say it, on the page, and yet it's still the musicality of your voice that we hear. But can you talk about that tension between the written word and the oral word, and what Mama Day was saying in this blessing for words, but the acknowledgement that words can never.
Well, I think we go to poetry because we don't have the words. I mean, poetry holds what we have no words for.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, and it's like he's saying here, I mean, how do we're always trying, and painters and artists, and always trying to articulate the night sky, Van Gogh, you know, it's, and we do what we can, but it's not, and we're not trying to, I don't know that we're trying to remake it, or we're trying to understand it, or take it in, or breathe it in, or maybe it's trying to breathe us in or take us in. And so we wind up with this longing, because what's been implanted in us is a kind of longing, because we are the night, we are also the night sky. That maybe ultimately we don't need the words, you know, that it's, you know, ultimately. And it's always bothered me that literacy has been conferred only in written languages, that peoples who do not have written languages are seen as not civilized or uncultured, when much of our literature is memorized, or it was for some of us. We have shards of the English language, you know, a trade language, but a very useful trade language that has enabled so many of us to speak together on one hand, but it has been a major destroyer of cultures.
And this book is so powerful in that, on one hand, it feels like ceremony of these poems. And as you say, you know, that you want, I mean, I was almost stunned when you said that one of your goals was to bring people to the knowledge that, as you say, there's 573 federally recognized tribal nations in mainland United States, that 150 languages, that you said you wanted to allow them to know that Native nations are full of living people with living histories. And you even went to say, as human beings, that there is that you reject the word Native Americans to specificity. The Muskogee, the Diné, the Tohono O'odham. And I think that's so powerful, just that education to a public at large of what you're bringing to us as Poet Laureate, as through your voice.
Well, it's also, I wanted to add that this was an endeavor by a circle of indigenous poets, of Native poets. It was, there was a whole team of us, regional editors, contributing editors, and then here with us in the trenches, with me in the trenches as we thought about this and started laying out all the, there's so much organizing and other work that needs to be done, pulling up, finding things. It was at that time I was teaching at the University of Tennessee, Knoxville. And so there were my students. I looked around because the thought had been to do a Norton anthology of Native poetry. It needed to be done. I kept thinking, can I do this? I don't have the help. I looked around, there was my students. Right. So I was able to, I went to the department. Yes, you can do a class on, which was essentially, it's about indigenous poetry, Native poetry, but how to put together a Norton anthology. And so they were wonderful. And then they got to be at the meetings for the different regions, the different region editors, as we talked about, and Native poetry from all of these different areas. It was pretty exciting, and we read so much, and it was quite an amazing process it's still ongoing. And I open up and read something and it's like, wow, I forgot about that. How can I forget about that poem? And that's, but it is, yeah.
You talked about how you read it out loud, the whole book.
Yeah.
I mean, that must have been so powerful. How long did that take you, and what was the context?
It was the last edit, and it was with Jennifer Elise Forrester, who was, the three of us made the final editing team as Leanne Howe, Choctaw writer, and Jennifer Forrester, who is also Muskogee Creek. And I told them, I said, well, what I always do is read aloud. When I'm at the final or the near final, I just did that with my memoir the other night to Jennifer. I read it aloud, and then I catch so much. It's like, oh, I catch so much. And I said, we should read this aloud. So we sat there, we had to probably be about 4 sessions and read aloud. And we were crying at points and laughing. And it was like, and then you realize that this is only a very small amount. This could have been, we were limited by pages. They gave us more pages. My editor at Norton let us, at first they only wanted in 300 pages, which would have been, it wouldn't have, but we wound up with over 400. But can you imagine a poem, at least a poem or a couple of poems from every indigenous nation?
It's so stunning. 2 poems come to mind. I mean, there's so many, but I was wondering if you could talk about, one was Janice Gould, who was a friend of mine, Earthquake Season.
Mm-hmm.
That last line, it's on page 301. That last stanza where she reads, we were looking for another country, something not North America, a taste, a smell, a solitary image, the eucalyptus on a bleached hill. Its blue pungent leaves made you long for another home. How would you talk about that? You long for another home. That surprised me and really took my breath away.
Yeah, I'm just rereading this poem here. Made you long for another home, probably the home that was there before.
I mean, that was so poignant in that way, right?
Yeah, and it's another way. And then the whole poem ends, the earth is breaking open. I will think of you and know somewhere in the world, the earth is breaking open.
I mean, that just undid me.
Yeah, she was such a good poet.
And do you feel that in terms of, because you talk a lot in your own poetry about home, and it feels like you have many homes. I'm wondering, how you hold that together. Where do you feel most at home?
Well, my soul has many homes. I think it is, my soul has many homes. And then I knew You have to read. I have a new memoir I just finished, and
I can't wait to read it.
it's called Poet Warrior. Yeah, a call for love and justice. But I had to come back here. I mean, it's Oklahoma has always been a kind of a hate-love thing. There's a history here. It's difficult. It's a difficult history. But when I've gone back, it's interesting over near, and it's near where some part of my family is from, near Columbus, Georgia, right by the Chattahoochee River. And it's like, I could just stay here.
Mm-hmm.
But I have felt that there was a place, I was up with some of the Sami people, and I remember standing on a hill above Tumsa with thinking my soul, I knew my soul would be taken care of there.
Hmm.
I've also stood on the Nile I've stood in a few different places in the world. But I am bound to the story of my people. I love my people. And that love was planted in me and sustains me. And because of that, that's what I'm taking care of. I was given our story to help take care of it.
I have so many questions for you personally, as long you have that great question that you ask that just haunts me, and I keep asking my own self that. What did you learn here? And I wonder, what did you learn in this memoir I'm so interested to read it. And how does this memoir what did you learn in this memoir that you didn't learn in Crazy Brave, which was so beautiful?
Oh yeah, I always doubt my writing. We all do go through that. I was thinking, I was reading through this, and then sometimes I think it works, and other times, because my editor said I changed memoir again. But I shouldn't tell you the ending, but it's okay, because in this memoir, it's still my voice, it's still me, but I'm looking at teachers, looking at how I've been taught, and what I'm going to leave, something to leave. It doesn't mean, no, I have a feeling I'm going to live older than I think I am. I have an idea. I'm not worried about it. It's just what is. It's part of life. It's part of living. But I had a dream, and it winds up being, I had about 3 endings in an earlier draft. Some friend read and said, you got 3 endings here. I said, yeah, and I like all of them. But, why can't I end it in 3 ways? I guess I could. Yeah. But I had a dream. This wound up being the ending where I think I'll read it. Let's see if I got it here. I keep fiddling with the language of it. But I had a dream in which I was holding my 7th generation granddaughter in my arms, and it was a real dream. And some of them are real, and in dreams, like real life, we're not bound by the linear. We're not, it's different. And so the character, there's a whole kind of a poem, spoken piece that goes all the way through. And she starts out as a girl with Girl Warrior, becomes Poet Warrior. I don't go over all the same territory. I kind of started farther on, but like in memory, you go back. I can sit here, you go back to, we're always moving back and forth.
Again and again.
Yeah. Yeah. And then, so Poet Warrior becomes this, and then there's the regular story that happens, the regular pieces. But this is the end of it. And so I took that dream and put it like this. Poet Warrior stood at the doorway of time. She held the child of the 7th generation in her arms, adjusted the soft blanket to see her face, to glimpse what this one was bringing with her to share. In the way she took every child, grandchild, and great-grandchild into her arms to welcome them, to bless them, during her time walking on the earth. Poet Warrior smiled as she thought, she looks Japanese. She resembled her daughter Rainey, the newborn's great-great-great-great-grandmother. Poet Warrior sang into the baby a song that would give her strength and sustenance, would call her ancestors to stand behind her, no matter the trials, no matter history and heartbreak. Then she walked with her into time to deliver the baby to the earth's story that needed her.
That's so beautiful.
But it kind of ends a little bit, I wind up, it starts with me talking. I love hanging out with my Aunt Lois Harjo and going around and talking to people. you know, I like to sit and listen. And these are the older Creeks who knew things. They were my age then, you know, my age and older. And I love being in their company and hanging out. So at the end, I'm with the son of the cousin that she used to hang. I used to go, and he and I hang out a lot together. So it kind of ends with us hanging out.
It's so beautiful. And the relations, it makes it's true. I mean, you say it's a dream, but it feels true.
Yeah, it
And
is. I know
yeah,
it. I know on some level. I mean, because there is no. I know on some level it's already happened.
yeah. And I mean, I saw her, your seventh generation child, you know, as you tell that story. I was interested in that your first words of this is, it begins with the land, you know, and then you end it with for all of time to the present. And it feels like that's just what this story of the poet warrior, that you this circle is there as well.
Mm-hmm.
One of the questions I have is about trespassing and what Native people have endured over and over and over again. The trespassing of your lands, the trespassing of your culture, the trespassing of your people. And I was interested in Stacy Pratt's poem on page 408. And I'm wondering if you would care to read that or comment on that piece.
I'd like to read it.
Yeah.
A young Creek poet who moved back recently to Tulsa.
Huh.
I know her mother and Phyllis Fife, and her father. I had met him. He was teaching at Indian school when I was a student there in high school. A Creek woman beside Lake Ontario. Here too, a great gold snake writhes beneath the water, his head at the shore, looking for us. And is that him riding the mist in lines like subway commuters rising up to the ground in an entire other day? He's brought me east to Black River Bay, and so far the land has not swallowed up our children. But if he shoots another arrow in the morning, I will follow it all the way to the sun's house before turning around. I go where he sends me. I never stray entirely from the circled houses, the old bones, the ball fields, the pots of corn hanging over fires in the night, the stories he keeps repeating from inside my own body. Oh man, you could talk about DNA in here. You can talk about how mythical structures are living beings and, you know, are always with us, and we move above and inside them. You can talk about time like that. You can, you know, it references an old story, or maybe more than an old story, and yet still we have our ball fields.
Yeah.
We have our old bones. We still have pots of corn and we're out there cooking. We still do.
And when you talk about grief in American Sunrise, I'm wondering, in Exile of Memory, you talk about how grief is killing us and anger is tormenting us. But then you also turn it around to what I see as a healing. And it reminds me of Willie Gray Eyes after Trump came in and gutted Bears Ears by 85%. I went down to visit him, and as you know, he's now a county commissioner. And I said, Willie, how do we cope with our anger? What are you doing with your anger? And he said, Terry, it can no longer be about anger. It has to be about healing. And I remember being stunned by that, thinking, as an activist, it felt passive. But then he said, we have to go to the source of our pain. And I wonder, you know, again, we're talking about bridges, but where do you see that interface between grief, anger, and healing? Because I hear it in each of these poems on some level, you know, in this anthology.
Well, that's what we're dealing with right now in this country, the wound.
Yeah, which goes back to that.
You know, and it's in everyone, and everyone has their take on it. But there are laws that you do not break, and if you break the laws, you suffer. You know, we don't cause harm to, you know, you don't cause harm to others. You don't cause violence, you know, only in self-defense. You take care of the land, you don't take more than you need. There's just basic laws, and when we break them, you know, we suffer. There were laws broken at the founding of this country. You don't come here looking, needing a home or a place to live, and then kill to have that home or to take over, or as Andrew Jackson did, you know, move uproot thousands of people and tell everybody, you know, they're heathens or not human, or even to take over the, you know, rule somebody not human when you know it's a lie. You know, it's a lie used to, you know, and so we're still living in a kind of lie. We're still living in a kind of denial. And yes, what do you do with the grief? The grief is, that's why I went to poetry. I think that's why we have these poems, because you look at an interface. This is a way to make, is an interface between the fury and the disbelief, the grief of losing children and generations, and being, you know, walking around from the lands that hold, you know, I know where that Thai snake lives that she's talking about, in the Chattanooga, you know, and then that snake winds up in other pools too, but there's a direct address, and you're uprooted. Like, you know, this is, for me, you know, I mean, for a lot of us, we go to try to find a place where we have no, we have no words for experiences. Some things, I've come to the conclusion that there are some things that we will never understand. That I have a one-woman show, and the spirit helper tells the protagonist, you know, who once again is up against this tremendous abandonment and grief, and spirit helper tells her there are some things that take an eternity to understand.
So, you know, in your poem that I love, How to Write a Poem in Time of War, and it feels like we are in a war right now. Where do we begin? Because that powerful sentence, you can't begin just anywhere. Where do we begin?
That's a hard one, because I remember standing looking out into the trees and thinking, when my spirit asked me, you know, what did you learn here? And I think, where? And that's how that line came about, is to argue. I usually tend to argue, you know, well, how am I supposed to do this? I can't do this, or, you know, what do you mean? It's like, yeah, where do we start? But the thing I've learned, and I've had to learn it to save my life, is that you have to make it, you've got to bring the story, or you've got to keep bringing it into where you can, till you can hold it in your hand. You got to bring it so that you can hear it, hold it in your hand, and then let the heart process it. It's hard, you know, and listen. But it's not easy. It's some of the hardest thing. It's difficult. It's hard.
You know, I had a student, and I think about her every day, African American, and we were talking about climate change, and we were talking about how it affects all people, all places, but people of color, Native people, Black people, brown people are bearing the brunt of this. And we came to a discussion about, what does we mean? Because she said, your we is not my we.
Oh, interesting. Oh.
And I was so moved, and I actually sent her your poem, An American Sunrise, because that poem ends with we. And it gave me such hope. And I don't know, I guess what I'm asking you is, what is your definition of we?
That's a good question, especially given her that every we is not the same. And that poem, that poem would be, we are not 40 years later and we still want justice. We are still America. We,
Mm-hmm.
we indigenous nations.
Mm-hmm.
We, daughters and sons of the earth and the sky, and this process of this beautiful place.
And it goes back to me where we begin with the land. I mean, that feels like there's a we there.
Well, it's
And
not human. It's not just human. It's like the we is
yes,
all living beings. It's the little, it's insects. It's the,
yes,
and there's a communication. Plants. I write in here about hearing the plants for the first time when my mother asked me to set a plant down on her porch, and suddenly I heard them, and they were saying, "We don't want that plant over here." I heard them say that. And I'm not crazy, and you hear it in a certain way. And I thought, so then I spoke back to him in that place and said, well, then that's your loss. She's going to go over here. You guys shouldn't be so mean. But then you learn that, the world is, it's like some people think the natural world, this calm, beautiful place. There's politics, there's politics, even the plants, I've learned bird politics, all of it. Story making, maybe that's the deal. It's just one big story, because it is. There's all these stories going on. Even the plants, how the trees are, who's related to who in the tree. There's, the places on Earth. And it's one big. I think the we is one big story.
I love that. The other day we had this huge windstorm, and the good news is it blew the smoke out of the valley. But all the blossoms, and the coyote willows were everywhere. It was just this beautiful kind of magenta blanket. And then I saw this little ant, honestly, this big, carrying, over its shoulder like an umbrella. It carried this blossom that was this big. It was like a snapdragon blossom, all the way across the patio, down, and I followed it. It took me 25 minutes to watch, this ant carry this blossom all the way to the threshold of its ant colony. And then all of these other ants came and just pulled it down under, to who knows where. But it was such a beautiful thing just to witness that one windstorm creates beauty for one single ant to carry. And every time it went over a place where it could have been harmed or a crack in the, patio, 3 ants appeared out of nowhere to help it over, And
That's funny. I mean, that's cool. Did they eat? I wonder if they eat those blossoms.
I don't know, and I thought, how on earth are they going to get this big blossom in? And they just cut it up, and they all took little pieces, and then down it went. And it's like there is no metaphor. It was just the beauty of this moment, and what a privilege to just witness that. But I find
I love that. The other day it's been about a month or two ago, I was out we have a little bit of property south, and I was walking across, and I was startled by this little, I looked it up, we call it a smooth green snake. I'm sure that's not the name it calls itself. And the snake and I were startled. And then we calmed, and I said, so we just took some time. I started talking with it. I said, well, I haven't seen you before. I don't know. And the snake stopped and turned around. So then we kind of visited, and I said, can I take your picture? I do portraits of even insects. But if you ask them, I mean, most of them, or even the flowers, I always, you ask them permission. I said, do I have permission to take your picture? And a lot of times there was a spider in my condo I used to live in Albuquerque, and that spider was she kind of ruled the house. She ruled the insect kingdom in the house, and she was a little bit kind of crabby. She was kind of a jumping spider, and she was walking across like this. And I said, okay, I know you run everything around here, but do you mind if I take your picture? I've got a nice portrait of her. So she turned back around and posed, and then she went on.
I love that.
So I'd like, go ahead, Terry.
I was just going to say, I have one last question, and then we can open it up quickly. But Joy, you're an activist as well as a poet and a musician. I'm wondering, how do your words translate into action?
I always remember thinking, feeling badly that I wasn't always, running an organization on the front lines. And Leslie Silko reminded me, she says, my writing is my activism.
Mm-hmm.
What I do, and I've thought about that. But it translates to everything, into your behavior, how you treat each other. Your behavior in every small moment is your activism.
It certainly has activated my heart, and I'm so grateful to you.
Oh, you too.
And
I'm so looking forward to this. And
me too. Me too. And ongoing. I think we have some questions from the participants. Josh, do you have them?
Well, I'm going to jump in, and I just want to share in terms of small actions that I had the great privilege today to free a large scorpion from a glue trap. And the method in which to do that, because it's not easy, is to use a little oil, olive oil or cooking oil. I also used a chopstick to keep safe distance from freeing the stinger. And it just felt so good to do that small gesture. And I think an appreciation of the minutia that we are a part of, we can hopefully, learn some of the actions that you're trying to share with us today. I would like to start off with the question period by just asking for both of you, perhaps nature is trying to teach us something now. Perhaps, us taking this fear and responsibility for our predicament in relation to the perceived harshness of nature could be approached in a more holistic way by surrendering to nature's will and seeing what the consequences of both our action and her intentions are for us.
Well, we are nature. I mean, we are nature, and certainly the pandemic, which is of a natural force. Maybe there was manipulation of a natural force, in some place or the other, but it has certainly caused us to globally to reckon with our relatively small humanness and to take the time to reflect. It gives us time to reflect on who we really are.
And I feel that, what you were saying, Joy, that this moment, this time, I feel like we are both eroding and evolving at once, that it's a reckoning and an awakening. Mm-hmm. And I know, having been a lifelong resident in Utah, this is a really hard place to live, even among my own people. I come out of a Mormon background, which I have left, but I haven't left it culturally. It's still my people. And yeah. I choose to stay here. But the leadership that is coming and that is being recognized finally, in this state is coming from the indigenous people, from the native people, from the native nations, whether it's Diné, whether it's Hopi, whether it's the Pueblo people. And I think that Bears Ears, as heartbreaking as this has been, and I really do believe it will be remedied. I think that when they talk about Bears Ears being our healing, I feel like that's happening here in this state in quiet and powerful ways. Mm-hmm. And that those of us who come out of a background of white supremacy, where Native people were called Lamanites, that now we are seeing how horrible that is, how demeaning that is, and are being called on it. And I'm so grateful especially to the women of Bears Ears, from these 5 nations who are really saying, we have a different story to tell, many different stories. And they are really not only asking to be heard, but demanding to be heard through their actions, through their lives, through their words. And it has changed, it is changing all of us.
I remember hearing years and years ago through, from people from many different elders from many different tribes, is that they would always say, one day they will come to us. I always remember those words, one day they will come to us.
And I do think the land is speaking in ways that, the climate is saying, you are not in charge. This is what has been wrought by decisions, by placing you at the center. And that, within a month ago, we finally had rain. We've had 2 inches in the Colorado Plateau. That's it. I put 2 inches in a glass and it was a sip. And you think of this big country, and it rained, just momentarily it rained. And then, I promise you, a black rainbow appeared. And I went and got my husband and went, are you seeing what I'm seeing? And it was a black rainbow, and it was caught between 2 rainbows. And we found that it has a name, Alexander's Bend or arc. But I thought, what is that saying? I don't know, but it was stunning. I've never seen a black rainbow.
Wow. I'm going to look that up. They're off here, yeah.
It was called Alexander's Band. But isn't that wild?
It is, yeah.
Okay, I want to thank you both for such an extraordinarily intimate and earnest sharing of your friendship and your visions together. I think we've all learned, and there are many of us who participated today, just the value in observing, listening, taking the pause to really understand in silence, as well as through words, where we are and where we must go. And thank you for being guides to encourage us in that direction today. It's very, very meaningful to me personally, and I'm sure to everyone who participated, as is reflected in the wonderful sentiments that were shared in the chat. This recording will be available and be shared many, many times to those who were unable to participate today. And for that, I'm grateful for this technology. I do look forward when we can actually come in human proximity with each other again, hopefully very soon. And I just bless you, ladies, and bless everyone who is with us today. And unless you'd like to make a closing statement, we can sign off. You want to just say goodbye to our viewers, Terry and Joy?
I thank you, Josh, for bringing us together. Joy, thank you. You break my heart, and I can't pay you a higher compliment than that. Your words break my heart over and over and over again, and allow me to feel what it means to be human, and we in all its entirety. So bless you, bless Josh, and to all of you who have chosen to be with us. Thank you. Joy, over to you, last word.
Yeah, thank you, Mado, and I thank these lands, everywhere we are. You think about doing a land acknowledgement, and here we are from this virtual, which isn't quite a real world, but at least we're able to gather together. And thank you, Ian, for that acknowledgement. And I loved something you said there about our custom is sharing. Mm. And that's true. That's with our people. That's it's the measure of, of humanity. It's the measure of being, it's sharing. So thank you, everyone, for this sharing. All of you who had a part. To put something together like this takes a lot of resources and people, and thank you for spending time. And Terry, I miss you. It's so good to see you. And there's more. We could have gone on for a few more hours. So I know we're getting thank you, everyone.
I just want to encourage everyone, if it's possible, to step outside and watch the rising of the harvest moon, which is occurring at this moment, and take a moment to reflect on everything that has just transpired. I think there's an important connection there.
Yeah.
Bye-bye. Thank you, Terry.
Josh, thank you so much. What a beautiful evening, and I'm so grateful. Thank you for bringing us together.